Thanks so much for choosing to watch this presentation on SWE public policy. Today, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what SWE does in the public policy sphere and what you as a SWE member should know about that, as well as what you might do yourself in public policy and some limitations on your ability to speak for SWE or talk about what SWE is doing in that sphere. So, my name's Della Cronin. I'm a principal at Bose Public Affairs Group in Washington, D.C. I've been doing work for the Society of Women Engineers for a number of years on their federal policy initiatives with SWE leadership and members. So pleased to be doing that and being with you here today. So if you don't already know, it's worth looking at what SWE does in the public policy space. Largely, its public policy initiatives are pointed at supporting female engineers, prospective and current, what they're doing in the workplace and making it so that we can grow the STEM workforce and support the women who want to be there. You can read this to see what we're up to. At the federal level, a lot of the focus is on STEM education, opportunities to grow the STEM workforce, looking at Title IX and how it is applied among professional societies on campuses nationwide, and how that supports growing the STEM workforce. So to that end, the goals of SWE's public policy work is to advance its own mission by promoting equity for women in STEM through advocacy, education, and collaboration, and empowering members to engage in the policy issues that affect their careers and their communities. The organization's goals in that campaign are to educate its members about what's going on. There are a number of ways that it does that, including various posts on the website and the Altogether advocacy blogs, articles in the magazine. If you go to the annual conference, there'll be presentations there as well as what's going on, and then a number of other resources that are on SWE's website, including a public policy resource. Those tools are meant to support your participation in public policy, make sure that you're engaged at the federal level, you know what's going on, you know how to engage. And then also as an organization, leadership engages with other professional societies and policymakers on how Title IX can and should be applied to STEM fields. So right now, SWE's public policy work focuses on these 4 areas: strengthening America's schools by advocating for STEM education programs and other programs that support a technologically literate workforce. Practically speaking, these days, that means investing in STEM education programs at the Department of Education, the National Science Foundation, other federal agencies that are trying to grow the STEM workforce, identify talent, nurture talent, et cetera. How Title IX can be applied to STEM fields. We largely think of Title IX as an effort that addresses sports and other sort of higher profile issues on campuses across the country, but it also applies to STEM fields on college campuses, access to scholarships, admissions policies, making sure that women are supported in the STEM fields, in research labs, et cetera. Title IX has broad applications that affect women in STEM fields. In addition, we're trying to strengthen the workforce by making sure that there's equal opportunity for women in STEM education and in careers, and making sure that women have the supports they need to be successful on their terms in either academic STEM aspirations or professional fields. So in the work of trying to influence federal policy, there's oftentimes questions around what is lobbying, what is advocacy, what am I allowed to do as a private citizen, what am I allowed to do as an employee of a certain organization, as somebody who's on a college campus, et cetera. There is also a question about what SWE does at the federal policy level and whether or not that affects their status as a 501c3 organization. I can assure you that there are rules around lobbying for nonprofit organizations like SWE. SWE follows those rules steadfastly and is nowhere near coming to the threshold that would endanger its 501c3 status. You can see here some text from the tax code around some of these rules. You can see this first one. In general, no organization may qualify for Section 501c3 status if a substantial part, and substantial part is an important element of this phrase, of its activities is attempting to influence legislation commonly known as lobbying. A 501c3 organization may engage in some lobbying, but too much lobbying activity risks loss of tax-exempt status. So the term substantial part can be really frustratingly vague, particularly for engineers. It is vague by design, but I assure you that if you, the IRS and other federal organizations that are in charge of making sure that folks aren't breaking the rules have no worries about SWE. You are allowed to engage as an organization in a limited way, and SWE comes nowhere near testing those limits. But it is worth talking a little bit more about what it is they do in lobbying. So, of course, legislation includes action by Congress. There's state legislation. In addition, there's local matters. In terms of trying to affect legislation and how the tax code discusses it, it's any of these things. There's also public referendums, ballot initiatives. Any of those sorts of efforts are things that can be lobbied. And it's important to know that an organization that's trying to influence legislation via contacts or ask the public to contact members of Congress or other legislative bodies is engaging in advocacy and lobbying. But this last point, organizations may, however, involve themselves in issues of public policy without the activity being considered lobbying. For example, organizations may conduct educational meetings, prepare and distribute educational materials, or otherwise consider public policies in an educational manner without jeopardizing their tax-exempt status. That's really where SWE operates. Oftentimes when leadership and others are on the Hill on Capitol Hill talking to members of Congress and their staff about legislation or other issues of concern, it is these sorts of educational meetings that are taking place versus lobbying. We'll talk about what lobbying is in a second. So advocacy is something that is certainly permitted, encouraged for SWE members and probably other groups or organizations that you belong to. And while all lobbying is advocacy, not all advocacy is lobbying. And here you can see advocacy defined. It's an action that speaks in favor of, recommends, argues for a cause, supports or defends or pleads on behalf of others. It includes public education, regulatory work, litigation, and work before administrative bodies, lobbying, nonpartisan voter registration, and nonpartisan voter education, and many other activities. Lobbying is certainly much narrower when it's defined. It's communicating with folks who can directly influence legislation. It also requires a defined ask and a defined ask on a specific piece of legislation that's moving. So here you can see when in the definition of lobbying, while advocacy is a part of lobbying, lobbying requires all three of these elements. You must be talking to a decision maker. There must be an actual piece of legislation that is moving, and you are asking for a specific action on that piece of legislation. So I assume you're here wondering what all this means for you. Advocacy certainly influences social change through action. SWE has been advocating for a number of years and has made success on a number of fronts for women in engineering. We talked about lobbying as a form of advocacy, but SWE can utilize many other forms of nonpartisan advocacy without coming anywhere near damaging its 501c3 status. But as a SWE leader or a member, you are not allowed to say that SWE endorses a political candidate for office. You can't use funds to support any political candidate for office. SWE is not in the business of supporting particular candidates in any race, state, local, federal. SWE can influence policy and legislation, but the amount must fall within the defined range, which is not really defined, that substantial part. But because of that, we can't really have members going around saying that SWE is for or against anything unless SWE has already taken a position on that piece of legislation. And if you're trying to figure out if SWE has taken a position on a piece of legislation, you can check their policy pages, but also contact leadership. So here's a quick overview of what you as a SWE member can or cannot do on behalf of the organization. You are not allowed to speak for SWE. You can't use any funds of SWEs or SWEs groups to contribute to a partisan cause or candidate. But of course, as a private citizen, you are free to do that and encouraged to do that. I certainly think that engaging in these processes is a healthy activity for any citizen in the country. You can use SWE, you cannot use SWE's position or group to endorse any political candidate or speak on behalf of SWE or your SWE group to endorse a candidate. You cannot say that SWE endorses a piece of legislation unless you're certain that they do. All of these things that you shouldn't do as a member of SWE publicly, you can certainly do as a private citizen. And again, if there's a question on this, please contact headquarters before you do anything. So as I mentioned at the top, there are a number of SWE resources that you can consult at any time when you're taking on advocacy or lobbying or any sort of effort to influence what's going on in public policy. SWE has a public policy page. I encourage you to visit it and take a look at what's going on there. And as always, if you have any questions, please contact leadership. Thanks so much for watching, and hopefully we'll see you out there. Bye-bye.